Now, what I was struck by, I mean, I've been doing this stuff a long time, and I've actually done work in this area, and I've written stuff on it as well. And even knowing it, I was struck by how when I went through the course, I would reference that model again and go, I've been missing some things. I've not been in flow states quite as regularly as I'm used to throughout my life. And that's certainly been true the last year and maybe even the last couple of years. I'm probably not feeling as purposeful in certain areas of my life. And so what I found was that, and this is a point I'll come back to a lot about your marriage of PERMA and integral, is how it became psychoactive. As I went through the course, it became psychoactive. And I've said this to you privately, is like, when you build the mind of you build kind of a flourishing mind, it pulls you towards it naturally as kind of a gravitational attractor, because you start to recognize, oh, maybe I'm not feeling as purposeful, or I'm actually not feeling as connected with my friends. And even this week, I thought, I could reach out. There's 3 or 4 really important women in my life that I haven't reached out to in like 3 or 4 months, like my sister, my aunt, and I'm going to pick up the phone this week and do all of that. So I love how that psychoactivity takes hold in this.
That is very beautiful. And I think that's one of the things that I would say the course does, is that it encourages people to take action based on everything that we discuss, and to identify where there's room for improvement in your own life, and then to just do concrete things that make you feel better and that improve relationships and that contribute to flourishing. So it's wonderful to hear that the course is having an effect on you.
Yeah, no, it is. It's really neat. And let's talk about that. So this is really relevant right now, isn't it? We're coming into a year of a pandemic. We've all kind of had our lives put both in stasis and kind of in upheaval in a lot of ways. How are we doing? What are the statistics? Are we doing well as a people? I mean, I know, we're all dealing with a lot of stuff. So what does the data tell us?
Well, it's interesting because the United Nations recently released their annual World Happiness Report. And that says that due to the COVID pandemic, average mental well-being in the United Kingdom in 2020 was almost 8% lower than predicted in the absence of the pandemic. And that about 22% of the population reported significantly lower levels of well-being than before the pandemic. And my feeling is that as more data continues to come in, we'll likely see similar suffering in other countries, which means, as you said in the introduction, and Adam Grant said, is that a large number of people across the world are indeed languishing. And I would say that if we revisit Martin Seligman's PERMA+V model, and I'll share a screen again, then it actually makes sense within the categories that he describes. So if we're looking at the PERMA+V model, then first of all, if we look at positive emotion, then we can say that the pandemic has left many people feeling, well, I would say much less happy and more fearful about the future.
Indeed.
And
joy is harder to access when you're reading the headlines and when you're under a state of fear and anxiety.
I agree. And I would also say that, at least from my own perspective, I've been following the news much more intensively since the pandemic, just to keep abreast of all of the government regulations and things like that. But that also means that I'm exposed to that 24-hour news cycle of basically lots of horrific stuff coming from all across the globe, and very little positive stuff. So yeah, I agree. And so that indeed, as you say, joy much less within positive emotion. And then if we look at engagement, then many people are experiencing less engagement at work, so less flow states, either because they're working from home with a lot of distractions, or because they've partially or sometimes completely lost their job, or of course because they're experiencing increased stress levels at work. For instance, think of frontline healthcare workers who are working sometimes ridiculous hours and not being able to recuperate sufficiently. And then if we look at the next category of relationships, then many people have seen their social circles shrink due to lockdown measures. So that what you're just describing about the women you haven't contacted for a while, I think that goes for many people, that that contacts have really shrunk, and I would also say that many intimate relationships have been placed under much greater strain due to more people having to work from home, spending more time in each other's personal space. Sometimes, of course, with children kept home from school as well. I don't know how it was in the United States, but there's been a significant period in the Netherlands where the parents had to keep their children at home and had to school them themselves.
Right.
In addition to all of that,
we had the same effect variously throughout the school districts throughout the United States.
yeah. So that puts a lot of pressure on families and on relationships. And another thing that I think is also very important is that many people have been deprived of physical touch due to social distancing rules. So that's within the context of relationships. And I would say that within the context of meaning, many people are experiencing less purpose in life than before. And that's due to restrictions in travel, education, work, and of course, social and cultural activities. So I know you just spoke about experiencing a slight decline in purpose that you experience. What would be the main reason for you? Would that be also things like travel and things that you can't do that give you pleasure?
Certainly we've always been, a traveling family, so it does have a big impact on us. In fact, as I said, we were living nomadically right up to the week that almost all the borders shut. So we had come through 4 countries in the prior 30 days, just in that period. So certainly travel is a big deal. And I'm still reflecting on what some of the other things are around the question of purpose. I think what we have found is that as we've done things like this webinar, or the things that we're trying to do with Integral Life with respect to like Integral Life practice, we've tried to adapt what we do to the new reality to be in service to people. And that has been meaningful. But there's been an adjustment. As life changes, you sort of have to be agile enough to say, okay, what can I do to bring the purpose back to me now that things are different than the way they were before?
And that's interesting. And I don't know if this is also relevant for you, but in 2007, there was a large European study done about how people experience their well-being, and levels of well-being were lowest measured in the Russian Federation. And one of the explanations that was given was that meaning is often also impacted by the degree of freedom that we experience to express ourselves, to move about, to take control of our lives, and that more dictatorial governments tend to produce citizens who experience lower levels of well-being. And I was thinking that perhaps within the context of the pandemic, with more restrictions also from a governmental level, that might also have some impact on our experience of meaning as citizens of countries.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me for sure. And now how about accomplishment?
Indeed. So, well, I would actually add some stuff to the meaning also, because one of the things that I became aware of over the last couple of years is that some people are also experiencing what's called climate depression, and because of many people feel helpless to prevent what they see as the possible future collapse of the Earth's ecosystems. And I think many people are also feeling existential dread about the possible oncoming economic effects of the pandemic. So I think that's also a lot of stuff that's impacting our sense of meaning as well. So
for sure. Yeah.
And indeed, if we look at accomplishment, then, well, many of us, I think, are unable to achieve the goals that are important to us. And if I think of all of the entrepreneurs that have been stunted in their plans to achieve just business goals, and I think that also goes for individuals. And some resources, of course, have also been cut off for people. So achieving goals has become more difficult and more challenging. So, and also within the sense of accomplishment, I would say, like Adam Grant wrote in his New York Times article about languishing, is that many of us are experiencing a drop in motivation to get things done and are much less productive than before. So that's also a factor.
Yeah, if you read
Would you
some of the
add?
comments, just to interrupt real quick on that point, if you read some of the comments to the Times article, there were people would basically say, "Well, my priorities have really shifted, and I don't, this whole pandemic thing and all the disruption, it's really changed what I care about. So yes, I still want accomplishment, but it's not the same accomplishment as maybe I wanted 2 years ago because maybe my priorities have shifted, they've deepened in some ways, they've matured. It's like it's the old, the old adage about you build your career if you lean your ladder against the wrong wall. Well, you climb the ladder and you're still on the wrong wall. And so I think this whole experience has probably, at least for some people, matured their sense of what's really valuable in their lives.
I agree. And I would also say that it's possibly also contributing to a healthier business climate and a
Mhm.
healthy organizational climate, because for years people have been saying that they can work from home and cut out commuting time, and that's also a big factor in well-being, the duration of commute. And now, of course, organizations have been forced to have their employees work at home, and apparently it does work. So I think what you're pointing to is that, of course, the double-edged sword of any crisis is that it also produces some opportunities. And
Well, that's right. I mean, even though we're focusing on the negative aspects in terms of how it might contribute to languishing or not flourishing, it's also worth pointing out there's actually a lot of really beautiful, amazing positives that are coming out of it. And if, as you say, if we're able to work from home as a more sort of integrated part of our work lives because of this experience, and we get the freedom, and we can take the work trip when we want to, or go into the office or whatever, that sort of integration or synthesis of having that freedom plus the capability to work from home, maybe spend more time with our families, that's really going to be a very big positive, and I think we'll see a lot of that.
I agree. Yeah, I certainly agree. So
Okay, continue
to
on.
conclude, indeed, the PERMA model in relation to or PERMA+V in relation to the pandemic, I would say that if we look at vitality, then many people are feeling less energetic and fit. And of course, probably because many people are exercising less due to lockdown restrictions. And I know of some people who've also been eating less healthily than before. And
Drinking a lot more, alcohol sales were through the roof.
indeed, indeed. So I would say that that's one way we can use the PERMA+V model to gain deeper insight into the mechanics of why people experience higher levels of languishing than before the pandemic.
Yeah,
But on
indeed.
the other hand, I'm sorry, but on the other hand, I was going to add that I like the way you were speaking about the positives, because it's not all bad. And on a positive note, there are many people who've also been able to turn this global crisis into a personal opportunity for growth. And one of the things that, of course, I've been seeing also as someone who's been leading the practices for integral life, is that many people in the integral community have attended the practice sessions to invest in their own well-being. And I would say that's my intention with this course also, is to offer people an additional option to invest in their long-term health and well-being, and hopefully to have some fun while doing so.
Yeah, absolutely.